Hey there, bibliophiles. Welcome to another episode of From the Archives, a book review podcast where I talk about a book from my library and whether you should or shouldn't read it. I'm Eric, a professor of anthropology at Cuyahoga Community College, and welcome to my library. The books in my library are sometimes old, sometimes rare, sometimes normal, but always interesting. This podcast is normally recorded live on YouTube at Anthropology Archives every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern. Except for when it's pre-recorded because I have prior obligations, such as today's episode. Every episode I ask myself the following questions. Who wrote it? What's it about? What are other people saying about it? Should you read it? And whether I should can it or keep it, chuck it or cherish it, reread or recycle, shelve it or shove it, or, topical to this week's episode, courtesy of our guest, jettison or set it in. This week we actually have our first guest on the podcast. She's an avid reader of young adult literature, has a bachelor's degree in English language arts, as she told me to correct myself for our foreign language guests, and has a master's degree in higher education, administration, student affairs, and counseling. Did I get any of that right?
Well, my bachelor is in secondary English language arts education for grades 7 through 12. And my master's degree is in counseling and human development with a specialty in student affairs and higher education.
So I got some of those words. So with that being said, let's pull a book from the shelf. Here's our nice ASMR segment, and then we drop them here. I should probably drop them separately. Yeah, so they're hardcover books. I read, Jet Set by Carrie, Karasyov, and Jill Kargman. And also Don't Judge a Girl by Her Cover by Allie Carter, which is the third book in a 5-book series, I believe. So, before we really dive into these two books, I didn't really introduce you by name, but hello, welcome to the podcast, Kristin Tripi.
Hi, I'm Kristin Tripi.
So, you're a longtime fan of reading young adult fiction, right? So, how long have you been reading YA novels?
I would say I started reading YA novels around the time I became a young adult myself, when it became age appropriate. So
what age is that?
So we're looking at probably about age 12 and up.
Okay. And what kinds of, is there a specific genre of young adult, I don't know, when I think young adult, I think of, I guess, specifically high schoolers dealing with high school problems, and I don't know if it's, because we talked about this before the podcast started, is it necessarily the context, or is it just the age of the protagonist that makes it young adult?
So it's a little bit of everything that you said. So high school is a typical age, so that's about 14 to 18. Mm-hmm. But, young adult also includes middle school students, like me saying that I read books that were ages 12 and up. So you can have middle school students, high school students, but it also that's the age range because, not everybody in these books go to school. And it deals with very specific topics that deal with that age range. So a lot of the topics in young adult novels deal with family issues, deal with finding yourself, discovering your identity, figuring out what path you are on, and developing as a person. Because what you want to see in the characters is some sort of growth that you would find in, say, a typical teenager or a preteen.
Okay. Well, I guess when you were describing that, in my mind, you mentioned specifically that they don't necessarily have to go to school, so that it made me immediately think, would we consider Huckleberry Finn or Tom Sawyer a young adult novel? Just because it I think it checks off all of those boxes, even though in my mind it doesn't. I wouldn't necessarily put it in the YA novel section next to these two books that we're talking about today.
So people who identify as young adults can completely grasp Huckleberry Finn.
Right.
But it's not necessarily in the age of writing books for the teenage experience, per se. So it features a person who is, I believe, a child in Huckleberry Finn.
Yeah, I can't remember. I think he's got to be like in his teenage. He's got to be like 13 plus, I think.
But it doesn't necessarily touch on the psychological topics that you deal with at that age necessarily. So we understand that Huckleberry Finn is young, but we aren't necessarily talking about his development at that age.
Right. Like not really talking about problems that people his age were going. Well, and I guess that's also just not to turn this into the Huckleberry Finn podcast, but I guess that's just also a reflection of like the late 19th century, how like childhood wasn't really
childhood.
Yeah, it wasn't really a thing to talk about. Like people was like, oh, you're old enough to work in a factory. All right, you're an adult in our books.
Yeah, so I took a course in college that was about YA literature, and we read books that would be taught in a high school classroom. So like you could read Crime and Punishment, and a young adult in high school could understand Crime and Punishment, but it's not necessarily YA,
right?
Because it doesn't hit on those topics of developing as a person, family issues,
first loves,
things that say, like when you're listening to Taylor Swift's music in her early career, how she was really talking about her high school experiences, and her music can still be enjoyed today by younger audience members, but they're no longer touching on those experiences as a teenager.
Good point. Which I guess kind of segues nicely into the books we're talking about today. So the whole impetus behind this was we have a book on our bookshelf, Jet Set, and neither one of us had read this book. And
I believe I picked it up free off a library cart.
Well, yeah, this one says Canton City Schools, McKinley High School. So this is something that you probably got.
I probably picked this up off a library cart around 2017 because, libraries like to get rid of books.
Right.
They like to chuck things.
And we have a lot of books in this library that are very much in that description. So I decided to switch things up this week and try and read this one. But I got to, I want to say I got to like 100 something. Like well over 2/3 of the way through this book, and I started griping to you about my issues with this book, and you're like, no, you got to read another book. So me not being someone who reads young adult novels, you recommended I read one of the other books on our shelf, even though it's the third in the series, Don't Judge a Girl by Her Cover. And what a world of difference it was reading Allie Carter's Don't Judge a Girl by Her Cover versus Jet Set. So let's talk first, I guess, about Jet Set and all of the problems with it. By first talking about the authors. So, because I did the research before this, so you probably didn't know anything about this, but Carrie Karasyov, I'm butchering her name. Some of the other books that she has written, I think I have her pulled up here. The Infidelity Pact, Wolves in Chic Clothing, The Right Address. So all three of those one of them was co-authored actually by the same co-author of Jet Set, Jill Kargman. And this one is about a pact of LA moms having an extramarital affair. This one, I think, the Infidelity Act, I should specify. Wolves in Chic Clothing was about like New York City fashion, Devil Wears Prada style stuff. So, women in their 30s and 40s or older. And then The Right Address, same thing, like Upper East Siders, like the insider scoop of all the moms. And the other lady, what's her name? Jill Kargman wrote also about like adult women. And this is like sort of the oddball out young adult novel. So there's that going on. And then there's also the problem of the title, Jet Set. Do you know what Jet Set means? Because I don't know what Jet Set means.
I guess I took it as she's attending an international boarding school. Sorry, I'm giving away part of the plot.
Oh no, we're gonna get into the plot here.
But I took it as she had to fly there, like on a jet.
Right. So I ended up looking up what Jet Set was, and even on the wiki page it says the flagging Jet Set gained its second wind in 1976. Basically, they're implying that jet set was this term that they used in the 60s for like when jets were starting out. So, like, there's already some red flags with this book, right? Jet set being a term that's outdated, I guess. I don't know. I personally have never heard someone say jet set.
You never heard of, like, oh, I'm going to jet set around the world?
No. I can't say I've ever heard that. Like, I feel like you would use other terms than, like, I'm part of... Because apparently jet set means specifically you're part of the jet set, as in set like club, meaning you're part of the private jet owners clubs is how it's apparently supposed to be. So do you want to try and describe this book, or do you want me to try and describe this book?
Yeah, I can try to describe it. So basically, Jet Set is about an outsider girl who is a high school student. So we got that classic fish out of water experience that many of us feel when we're teenagers. So our main character, she decides to apply for this exclusive boarding school that is attended by the elite around the world. The elite being the rich.
Yeah, like Prince Harry, Prince William. Like, they're not saying those names in there, but that's kind of what they're implying.
I mean, one of her classmates is a cousin to Prince William.
That's right.
Prince Harry. And basically, it's about her experiences of fitting in.
Yeah, I think that's a good description. It got a little problematic once you start getting a little bit more into it. Because I think you only got to page, 30 or something?
Yeah, I just did a little primer for this podcast.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're much more... I needed to read both of these books just to have any sort of foundation in this, whereas you're like, yeah, got it.
Yeah, I knew it was no good.
Yeah, and so I started telling you about some of the things. I was like, is it normal for them to talk about filming other students having sex and then trying to sell that to a tabloid magazine? So, yeah, this is where we get into spoilers. I mean, I guess we could say spoilers alert, but, I mean, the ultimate review of this is, if I could give this 0 stars, I would. This book is not a recommended read, Jet Set. But, yeah, there's a whole scene where, what's her name? Lucy, the main character, is, in cahoots with her friend, whose name is escaping me. Sophia. Yeah, see, you only read 30 pages and you already remember better than I do. Which we were conjecturing on the cover, because the cover art has 3 women on it, and I think we can guess who's who in this. I think the center is our main character, Lucy.
Well, you can also tell that could be Lucy because the way her chin is on her shoulder, it makes her look a little shy. And like I said, this is one of those hallmark things about YA novels, is it's about your development and who you are. Okay.
And she's in the center of the cover, so I'd assume this is Lucy. But then the question becomes, which one is going to be Sophia and which one is going to be, I believe, Angelina? There's 1 or 2 other characters that I think are in contention for that 3rd spot. But I feel confident that Sophia is the one on the right. And then I think Angelina might be the one on the left.
You may be able to tell that because Sophia on the right, or the person on the right, looks like they have a secret. And they're like, I have my eyes out looking for info. Where the other girl's twirling her hair on her finger. And she looks conniving.
So you're saying Sophia doesn't look like the conniving one?
No, she looks like, I can see what is going to be happening.
Ah. Yeah, because it turns out Sophia, her dad, is the editor of Gab, which is a tabloid magazine. And Sophia is literally planted into school by her dad to get scoops on these students. a 16-year-old boy having an affair with a 40-year-old married woman, and that's where I was just like, this does not seem like typical YA descriptions. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is not typical YA content.
No.
Okay, yeah. Which is, I think, a great segue to transitioning, talking about the other book, Don't Judge a Girl by Her Cover. So I could describe this whole book, because I did read this one cover to cover. What a world of difference it was, Jet Set versus this book. But since this is I would say, your baby of a series, I'll also turn the reins over to you if you want to give this one a quick summary.
Yes.
Or description of the series in general.
So, Don't Judge a Girl by Her Cover is written by Allie Carter. The first book in the series has one of my favorite book titles of all time, which is, oh my gosh, it's slipping me.
Oh no, do I need to look it up for you?
No. I tell you I love you, but then I'd have to kill you. You may have to get that.
Oh no, my caps lock is on. We're going to go to our books here. Okay, here we go. I'd tell you I love you, but then I'd have to kill you.
Oh, so I was correct.
Yes.
I think, just recording the podcast makes me so nervous. Because when I handed Eric this book, I probably said that title 80 billion times.
Oh, yeah. You said it like it was a monastic chant. Like, I can't even do it, but because I didn't read it. But you were just like, I tell you I love you, but then I'd have to kill you. And you said it just like
why don't you
fire.
just tell them all the titles? Because all the titles are pure gold in
Oh,
this
yeah.
series.
Like, they're all great plays on words. So, the first one we already just discussed. The second one, Cross My Heart and Hope to Spy. And then, of course, the one that we read for this week, Don't Judge a Girl by Her Cover. Only the Good Spy Young. Out of Sight, Out of Time. That one's not as clever. That one's kind of an underwhelming one, I think, of the whole thing.
I like that book, though.
I'm sure it's good. United We Spy, and then the most recent one, a prequel, The Spies That Bind. Those are all the Gallagher Girl books in the Gallagher Girl series.
So, basic, really quick whirlwind primer on this series, so then Eric can tell you a little bit more about the book he read, Don't Judge a Girl by Her Cover. The basic premise of the Gallagher Girl series is our main character, Cammie, she goes to a boarding school. So I recommended this book because it paralleled so well with Jet Set.
Oh, yeah. Like, I felt like... no, but seriously, I didn't mean to cut you off, but seriously, like, this book came out, I think, a year or two after... I think the Gallagher Girls series started. Like, this one, Jet Set clearly came out shortly after the hype of the Gallagher Girls books, and I wonder if Jet Set wasn't, like, trying to capitalize on that.
So, going off of that, both books take place at a boarding school. Both books, this boarding school is supposed to be for rich girls to attend.
Like, Cammie's best friend and roommate is the daughter of a future vice president, and like there's a bunch of political people from around the world there.
But it takes place at a boarding school for spies in training. So this is a book.
You are very excited about this.
It's about young adults going to school, developing, finding out who they are, having first loves, but dealing with it as they are trying to train for the CIA.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that to me, I feel like the biggest... I really liked this one Gallagher Girl book, which, oddly enough, reading the third one, I felt like you gave me enough of a primer about 1 and 2. Like, one, sort of like how the first one was like a Pirates of the Caribbean situation where it's like, we didn't know we were going to be writing a whole like series of books, so we just wrote a one-off, and then we got like renewed for a second book.
That's my conjecture. Allie Carter can always correct us on that.
If any of the listeners know Allie Carter personally and would like to write into the podcast, just send in your response to anthropologyarchives@gmail.com. But what was crazy different about that book, Don't Judge a Girl by Her Cover and Jet Set, was like how lewd Jet Set was. Like, it felt like borderline like pornographic in some scenes and descriptions. Whereas Don't Judge a Girl by Her Cover, like, the biggest, like, oh no, was, like, getting trapped in a tight space with her on and off again boyfriend, not sure what to define as, and saying, we were face to face and he didn't kiss me. And that was, like, the hot, steamy, like, romance of this book. Meanwhile, Jet Set's just like, oh yeah, like, here's the 22-year-old who's having sex with 16-year-olds at this boarding school. Like, what?
Yeah, so in the first few pages of Jet Set, it actually wasn't terrible. And Eric started complaining to me about the book. And I was like, well, maybe it's just because you don't like YA topics. Maybe you don't want to be reading about somebody in high school, and it's because you're not the target audience. And then he started talking about what were some of the things that he had problems with.
Yeah. I don't think we need to belabor why Jet Set was bad. Like, I mean, the whole, like, our main character Lucy finally getting the cojones to finally say, you know what, maybe I won't sell these stories to the tabloids, when it's literal footage of two teenagers having sex that we illegally bugged their room, recorded this without their consent, and then are debating whether or not to share that with the world. Like, what?
So, I do want to touch on that. So, it's not that YA novels, when we think about what the target range of age is, like 12 to 18, but YA novels can also, like, here I am as an adult, and I have talked to other adults who love reading YA novels because we like the topics that they write about and the themes. And it's not so much that you can't touch on, you know, inappropriate topics because it's meant for young people, but it's the way that they went and approached it. So, for example, in one of my college courses, it was argued that The Outsiders was one of the first actual YA novels. So you asked me if Huckleberry Finn was a YA novel, but we didn't have necessarily that teenage categorization.
Right. They hadn't been created as a consumer, I guess you could say, demographic.
Whereas The Outsiders was marketed towards young people. And if you are unfamiliar with The Outsiders, it deals with gang violence.
Right.
And so you have that violence. If we think about another really famous YA novel or series, you could think of The Hunger Games, which is some of the most heartbreaking, you know, stories that I have read. And you are having people kill each other, talk about politics in a way that can reach out to young people. So it's not necessarily about Jet Set being like overly inappropriate.
I think it was just the way it was handled.
Yes. Handled is the right word, because like Meg Cabot, I think, is one of the queens of YA literature. Meg Cabot wrote The Princess Diaries.
Right.
And in that series, like, they're having sex.
Yeah.
In other books that I have read, they're having sex. And so it's not that we just, like, don't judge a girl by her cover because, like, we're not Puritans. Most inappropriate thing was a girl wondering if a boy will kiss her.
Yeah, I think, I'm not trying to make it sound like I'm some puritanical prude or anything. I just think it was a case of, like, you get 2/3 of the way through a book, and not once does anyone pause to say, like, our main character doesn't even bat an eye at the concept of, like, a 16-year-old having sex with a 40-year-old married woman, and, like, the implications of letting that leak to the press, or, you know, bugging people's rooms to record them. And she keeps circling back to this justification of, oh, well, they're mean to me, like, they make fun of me from time to time. And by making fun of her, like, the worst that they did was, like, say, you're wearing that to tonight's formal. Like, that's the level of meanness that they had. And to retaliate with like literal crimes against, well, they hurt my feelings. It was just such a disconnect that I felt like it didn't do justice to someone who was like 16. Like, I understand when you're 16 you make silly mistakes and you're not thinking properly because you're still developing. But still at 16 you can figure out like bugging someone's room and recording them having sex and then selling that to the tabloids that's not good. And the fact that it didn't even cross this person's mind, it was just like, and this is a character we're supposed to like want to relate to and enjoy reading. It just didn't come off right at all for me.
I think for me, Jet Set and the way Eric described it is, it sounded like irresponsible writing.
Yeah.
So after
sure.
I read another book when I was a teenager, Meg Cabot, one where the character decided to have sex with her boyfriend at the end. I actually ended up having a conversation with my dad about it because that book made me want to have that conversation. Whereas Jet Set, you know, maybe they do understand that it's illegal to bug a person's room, and who has the technology to bug a person's room, but who's to say that somebody doesn't read this and then, you know, thinks it's okay to whip out your phone and video record, you know, fellow classmates kissing or something.
Yeah, it just definitely struck me as like all of these sort of things happening and not a single questioning of like what's going on. I mean, there's other things in there too about like embezzlement that they mention, and it's just sort of laissez-faire, like yeah this is just part of like hoity-toity jet set society, which really struck me when I looked at the other books that they wrote, like how that's like the genre that they write. So like, okay, maybe this makes sense based on their other novels, but I don't think it grafted well into the YA genre is another issue. But there you have it. We should probably start talking about what other people said about these books. So I pulled some good reads for Jet Set and for Don't Judge a Girl by Her Cover. And, well, actually, I realized we should probably give our reviews of these books before we start reading other people's reviews. Now, if I had to review Jet Set, I said I would give it 0. So realistically, on Goodreads, I'm going to give it a 1 out of 5.
Or half a star.
Can you give, I think, yeah, you can do half stars. So I'll give it a half star out of 5. And the way I review things, since, Kristin, you've never been on the podcast, the way I review things is a 5 out of 5 means I think this book is approachable to any audience, any adult, and it's a recommended, like, you should probably read this at some point in your life. That's what gets a 5 out of 5, in my opinion. So a 0.5 out of 5 is basically a don't ever come near this book. You don't need to read it. What would you give Jet Set?
Oh, that's a 0.5 or a 1.
Okay. And then Don't Judge a Girl by Her Cover. It's not for me, but I can definitely see the appeal. Like, I mean, if I was a father and I had a daughter who was reading this book series, I would easily read this book series with her. Because they were easy to read. I mean, it took me like less than a week to read it, and I was reading it very slowly and on and off. If I dedicated an entire Saturday, I could have probably read the whole thing cover to cover. And I can definitely see, if this is your jam, these are like great books to read. So I would probably give it, I'd probably say like a 3.5 out of 5.
Am I allowed to give different ratings? Like, this is a 5 out of 5 for young adult females.
Mm-hmm.
I would give it a 4 out of 5 for young adults who don't identify as female, just because they may not be able to associate themselves as much with
the main characters.
Yeah, and I think for me, recommending a book of between everybody must read it, I think you would be hard pressed for me to give a blanket 5.
Well, that's how I do the. You can do your 5-star rating however you want.
I would also then give this 4 out of 5 for anybody who's not in the YA range, just for the sheer fact that I would feel comfortable recommending the first book because I think it's lighthearted, fun, short, easy to understand. It's sort of like watching a popcorn movie.
Yeah, I think that's a good description of it. Like, I never felt like some of the books I've had to read for this podcast were just, I dreaded every waking moment having to turn the pages on some of them. This one, it was just more a matter of if I had 20 minutes, I'd sit down and I'd read. I mean, in 20 minutes, I could read like 3 chapters of this book.
If you identify as a young adult girl, like, this is probably one of the most empowering books that I had ever read. I found it essential for me growing up, and even to this day, like, I'm almost 30 and I still talk about these novels. So even if you wanted to chuck this book, Eric, I'm not letting you chuck it.
I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. That's not a...
this is a keep?
Oh, yeah. I think the other key thing to keep in mind is if the star rating is below 3, then it's immediately in chuck territory.
It just scooted by.
No. 3 or... Like, so 3, 3.5.
That's close.
Oh, I'm not chucking this book. It's also your book, so I can't chuck a book from... No.
Well, Jet Set was my book. I was the one who picked it up.
Oh, yeah, but we're both in agreement. This book is getting canned. This one is...
I'm not even sure I want to donate to anything.
Well, I'm willing to donate it to any listeners, so if you want this book, reach out to us via our email and check the public... I think I put it on all of our different links, but I have a public... why am I blanking on it? Google Sheet. There we go. I have a Google Sheet that has all the books that we reviewed, and if you want them or not in the book bin or not. So this is firmly going in the book bin, Jet Set, for anyone who wants it donated to them. And if nobody comes and claims it, then eventually it'll get tossed. But yeah, let's talk about, with that out of the way, let's read some reviews. I just want to read a couple. Since we said Jet Set is terrible, I want to read a couple 5-star reviews. It has 3.62 stars out of 5, which...
That's pretty low for a YA novel on Goodreads. I just want to provide that context. YA books, they're like 4s and above.
Okay, so 3.62, very bad. It's sort of like...
Google reviews?
Yeah, like what do people say about movie reviews with Google? It's like if it's under 90%, it's terrible. So 3.62 out of 5, 244 ratings, 30 written reviews. I'm just going to read a couple of these 5 stars. Alexis, with 2 S's, rated at 5 stars on October 6, 2012. I pretty much enjoyed this book over the summer. It was in between corny and really good. Okay. Agree to disagree on that one. Let's see. Oh, I always hate that on Goodreads when it says there's more, and then when you click on more, nothing actually happens. I've had that happen every single time I read reviews on Goodreads. I love this book. I really want it to have a sequel. There's not much of a romance with Oliver and Lucy. I love the whole setting of the place, even if it was too good to be true. Overall, it was a cute book.
That was by Maggie in
January 20th, 2010. Yeah, sorry, I forgot to read that part. Yeah, so some of these written reviews that are 5 stars are pretty brief. Not really a lot of context. Now let's jump over to Don't Judge a Girl by Her Cover and reading... Let me just say, looking at the reviews of Don't Judge a Girl by Her Cover, actually let's go to the rating. There was 4.2 out of 5 stars, so pretty high star rating, out of 65,576 ratings.
How many were there in the last one?
For Jet Set, there were 244.
Okay.
So there's your disparity right there. And then 2,677 written reviews. And I just have to mention with the written reviews here, some of these 5-star reviews, I mean, they are 5 paragraph, they are long. These are the longest reviews I've had to read on any of the books so far. Granted, we're only on episode 10, but these are some long reviews.
Also, for more context, because this is the realm I work in, these reviews are pretty normal length for YA novels that I have read. So, YA novels that are geared towards females. Just throwing it out there. Right.
I just get that sense knowing that you have a background in English language arts education. It just strikes me as I wouldn't be shocked if a lot of these
people... Just give them a nice short 5-star review.
Oh, me? No, yeah. I always review.
Oh, from Don't judge a girl by her cover?
No, yeah, like every book we review on the podcast, I end up posting a link to the episode along with our star rating. So I don't think I actually mentioned that in any of my other episodes, but there you go. If you want to go see what the ratings are, you can go follow us on Goodreads, and you can see all the episodes that we've done so far as well. But I actually wanted to read the lone 1-star review. There is a 1-star review.
Only one?
Only one.
You're telling me there is only
one?
Oh,
no, sorry. It makes up for less than 1% of all. 654 1-star reviews, but there's only one written 1-star review that I could find. Oh no, I guess there's a few here. But I just want to read May's from May 27th, 2017. This one is a bit lengthy, so I don't think I'm going to read the whole thing. Oh, no.
No, this looks like it's worth it to read the whole thing.
All right, here we go. Would you like to read it?
Actually, I wonder if she gave it 1.5 stars.
Yeah, she gave it 1.5. Well, I don't know. I think that was the one I originally wanted to talk about. But here, you want to read it? Or you want me to read it?
You can read it.
Okay.
I can't see it from this angle.
Oh, is it the glare of the screen? I fail to see the point of this book.
Question mark, question mark, question mark.
It could honestly be condensed down to 30 pages and added as an excerpt in another book. That's just patently false, but sure. That's me interjecting. I enjoyed how friendship seemed to be the dominating theme of this book, but the lingering love interest is pissing me off because asterisk, love triangle, asterisk.
Oh, I will interject at the end of that about that.
Oh, okay. The humor has not picked up, nor has the writing. Still very, very spelled with just the V, so I'm interpreting that V as very. Still V juvenile. Still V lame. Very lame. H with a lot of M's. What else? Cammy is annoying. Her friends are much cooler than her and I think it would be for enjoy... Wait, what? Hang on, how's this sentence going? Her friends are much cooler than her, and I think it would be more enjoyable if we got some more point of views going around, especially Beck's. My brain did this thing again where it wouldn't comprehend what I read. I think it was to save me from anything traumatic and intensely boring. Hopefully this series picks up because it's still boring and I don't know, man, not much else to say. And then I guess a quote that's uncredited to someone. Quote, I thought about how there are two types of secrets, the kind you want to keep and the kind you don't dare to let out. Oh, that's from the book.
That sounds like
No, that's definitely from the book. I know because I read the book.
I think what's interesting about that review was it wasn't the worst 1-star review I have seen in the sense.
Oh, okay.
In the sense that she's like, please, this was really boring. Make it better. So it sounds like she still wants to read more.
Right.
And then she's also saying, I want to see the POVs from other characters, especially Beck's. That shows that she's committed to other people
in the story,
other than our main character. But I perfectly see where May is coming from in this review. She put a lot of asterisks next to the love triangle. So for context, for people who don't read a lot of YA novels, especially ones geared towards people who identify as female. So the big thing in YA girl literature is love triangles. And it is, think, what's the vampire one?
Oh, Twilight.
Think Twilight. She had, are you team Jacob or team...
Robert Pattinson. I don't remember what his name is.
I didn't like that one as a teenager. I never finished it.
So what you're saying is this person's reviewing and complaining about love triangles when that's the shtick of this genre.
It's a bad shtick because it sends a bad message to young girls.
But is it really a love triangle in this one? Because I feel like, I'm trying to think back, and we had Cammy, and she had Zach, and then they mentioned her ex-boyfriend Josh for like 2 sentences.
Well, it says the lingering love interest is pissing me off because love triangle. So, in these books, in YA literature, there's this overused trope of a main character who unknowingly is
in the midst of a triangle
is attractive to many different people. And
Yes,
it always ends up with two people. And it typically comes down to an outsider boy and a...
troublemaker.
No, like the best friend.
Mm. Mm.
And so you get in these YA love triangles, you can see it in The Hunger Games. A book series about killing other children in the machinations, did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah.
Of the government controlling people. You still have Katniss thinking about Peeta or Gale.
Oh yeah, Gale.
And so this is just, I roll my eyes when I find a love triangle. It's no good.
Yeah, okay, it's fair. I would say in this particular book, not having read any of the other books in the series, I got the sense that, yes, Josh was the ex-boyfriend, but he literally gets such little lip service in the book that to call it a love triangle, I think is a bit extreme in this lady's case. Like, at the end of the book, he appears... He doesn't have any dialogue in the book at all, to be clear. He's mentioned in passing of, like, my ex-boyfriend Josh, and then he makes eye contact with Cammy. And that's the end of it. The end of it.
I think you also have to take into context when this review was written in 2017. So, what year did this come out, Eric?
This came out in, I think, 2009. Usually I'm supposed to say that when I start off. Yeah, so Don't Judge a Girl by Her Cover, copyright 2009. Jet Set, I believe, was... let's see here. Jet Set is 2008, but also keep in mind Jet Set is coming out 2 years after I'd Tell You I Love You, but then I'd have to kill you. See, now I'm getting good at it.
It's a fun title.
Yeah. 2006 is when that book came out. So Jet Set's coming 2 years after the first of the Gallagher Girl books, but a year before the third one.
But what I wanted to highlight is YA literature has,
Evolved.
I think, evolved in their target audience. Like, back in the day, your main character never ended up with LGBTQ relationships, which is becoming even more frequent in the books that I'm reading today, even ones that are sort of fantasy novel and like have that sense like they take place a few hundred years ago or whatnot.
Right, like 1300s stuff.
Yeah, like fantasy.
Yeah.
And you also had a lot less push for female characters to not end fall in love with everyone. End up in a relationship. So even if we think about it from a Disney perspective, you had the movie Tangled, which is about Rapunzel. Mm-hmm. She ends up with a guy at the end. But then you have Moana, which came out, 2016?
Yeah.
You know, that was great because they didn't end up with anyone at the end. Elsa doesn't end up with anyone at the end. And so when you take into account that any of this whiff of a love triangle in 2017, May is probably done. Like, even if it is just a little whiff.
Right. Yeah, that's true. I guess I didn't think about it that way.
I'm done. I'm done with love triangles. I love my books that don't have a love triangle. Right now I'm in the middle of a book that's a love triangle, and it just makes me angry.
Oh, well, I think, unfortunately, that's where we're going to have to end it, is leaving on an angry note of love triangles. The final thoughts on these two books are definitely, if you have any interest in the Gallagher Girls series, recommended read.
We're setting it in.
Yeah.
Set it
don't
in.
Don't judge a girl by her cover. Set it in. Don't jettison. Set it in. That's what it is. But Jet Set you can jettison for sure. Definitely get rid of that book from the bookshelf. That's going to do it for this week's episode. Thank you, Kristin, for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Hopefully we'll have you again on a future episode when we're talking about another book that's in your wheelhouse that's not anthropology or archaeology related.
I do own a lot of books.
Oh yeah, we're currently looking at the wall of books that are mostly Kristin's books on this bookshelf. But next week we'll be talking about coffee table books and all the coffee table books that we have. We have over 15 of them, and we'll start to talk about what is a coffee table book and, you know, what makes it for a good coffee table book. That's going to do it for this week, and until next time, never stop reading.